If someone dares to insult you, most people will tell you to forgive and forget. But Machiavelli knew the truth: mercy without strategy is weakness. Today, I'll show you how to turn their disrespect into your victory. Throughout history, the downfall of many great men has not come from the strength of their enemies, but from their own inability to govern their temper. When insulted, when slighted in public or betrayed in private, the natural instinct is to strike back immediately, to raise your voice, to confront, to show the world that you will not be treated with contempt. Yet Machiavelli understood that this instinct is the very trap your adversary hopes you will step into. For in that moment of unrestrained anger, you are no longer the master of the game, you have become its pawn. The first principle in dealing with disrespect is to master your own reaction, not through weakness, but through a deliberate choice to conceal the fire within you until it can be directed with precision. When you react instantly, you reveal the depth of the wound they have inflicted. You announce to the world that their words or actions have reached you, and this in itself is a form of surrender. To appear unshaken, even amused, strips their insult of its intended power. It denies them the satisfaction of seeing you unsettled, and in that denial you gain the first advantage. Understand this. The one who insults you has already calculated that you will respond in haste. They are counting on the noise of your reaction to distract from the substance of their offense. In politics, in business, in the courts of kings, this has been the ruin of many, for the loudest man in the room is rarely the most dangerous. The dangerous man is the one who hears, remembers, and remains silent until the time is right. Imagine your composure as a fortress. Every outburst is a gate you open for the enemy to march through. But if you keep those gates sealed, if you allow no hint of anger to escape, your opponent is forced to wonder, did their insult fail? Do you even consider them worth your notice? That uncertainty gnaws at them, erodes their confidence, and often leads them to expose themselves further. And when they expose themselves, you will see not only the weapon they use against you, but the weaknesses they have failed to hide. In the courts of Renaissance Italy, a prince who reacted impulsively to slights would find himself surrounded by vultures. A single rash act could undo years of careful alliances. A careless public insult could unite his enemies into one cause. The wise prince, however, would smile at the man who sought to humiliate him, invite him to dine, toast his health, and only months later would that man find himself stripped of influence, isolated from allies, wondering at what point the ground beneath his feet began to crumble. Such was the art of measured retaliation, and it began with the discipline to do nothing when every fiber of your being demanded action. You must learn to be the still water that reflects nothing but hides great depth. Let them think you are unaffected. Let them mistake your restraint for indifference. The truth is that you are calculating, measuring the battlefield, and deciding how best to turn their disrespect into the instrument of their ruin. For the man who acts in fury fights on the enemy's terms, but the man who waits chooses his own battlefield, his own timing, and his own manner of victory. In the eyes of the wise, the most decisive victories are often those won without the trumpet's call or the clash of swords. Open confrontation is costly. It exposes your intentions, reveals your strengths, and demands resources that could be better preserved for the battles that truly matter. Machiavelli knew that a ruler who fights every insult as if it were a rebellion soon finds himself drained, surrounded by enemies who now share a common cause. The true master of power understands that it is far more effective to erode opponents' position quietly, without alerting them to the hand that guides their downfall. When someone disrespects you, they are attempting to raise themselves by lowering you. If you answer with open hostility, you validate their importance and risk elevating them in the eyes of others. But if you act subtly in ways invisible to the casual observer, you plant seeds of doubt in their mind and in the minds of those around them. These seeds grow silently, and when the time comes, your adversary finds that their support has withered without a single public blow being struck. Consider political intrigues of Renaissance courts. A man who insulted a prince in public might expect to be exiled or executed at once. Such swift punishment might feel satisfying, but it often carried unintended consequences. The insulted man becomes a martyr, and his allies rally to avenge him. The more dangerous path and the more rewarding one was to let him remain in the court, believing himself secure, while quietly eroding the foundations of his influence. Perhaps a word is whispered here, a rumor seeded there. Perhaps certain allies of his find their fortunes rising when they distance themselves from him, while others suffer small, unexplained misfortunes when they stand by his side. The prince himself never lifts a hand, yet, piece by piece, the man's network collapses until he stands alone, vulnerable, and no longer a threat. The beauty of undermining without open war is that it leaves you free of the stain of obvious vengeance. Outsiders cannot accuse you of petty retaliation, for you have done nothing that can be traced to you directly. Instead, you appear above the quarrel, dignified, and yet somehow fortune always seems to favor you and not your rival. This is the art of striking without appearing to strike, of letting the enemy's own weight drag them down while you remain untouched. To master this, you must think in terms of influence rather than attack. Influence shifts the minds of others without their awareness. It reshapes the terrain beneath enemies' feet. The man you seek to diminish must one day look around and realize that the allies who once laughed at his insults no longer stand with him, that the respect he once commanded has evaporated. And yet he cannot point to a single moment when you moved against him. That uncertainty is its own form of torment, for he will begin to suspect every shadow, every silence, every smile. And once suspicion grips him, he will start to act erratically, alienating those he still holds close, doing your work for you without your hand ever being seen. Power does not exist in the deed alone. It thrives in the story that follows the deed. When someone disrespects you, the insult itself is fleeting, but the way it is perceived by others can endure far longer. Machiavelli understood that perception is the battlefield where reputations are won or lost. If you do not shape the story, your enemies will shape it for you, and they will ensure that every whisper, every retelling casts you as the defeated party. To control the narrative is not merely to defend your honor. It is to seize the pen from the hands of others and write the version of events that serves your ambition. The moment an insult is cast, there are eyes upon you, allies, rivals, the undecided. They are not only watching what happens, they are deciding how to interpret it. If you allow silence or inaction to be filled by rumor, your enemies will dictate the meaning of the moment. Perhaps they will say you were humiliated and had no answer. Perhaps they will suggest the insult was deserved. But if you step in quickly, not with uncontrolled anger, but with calculated framing, you can turn even the deepest slight into proof of your strength. This is not always done through direct words. Often it is achieved by guiding others to speak on your behalf, letting the story spread in the corridors and meeting halls without your fingerprints on it. If you remain calm, yet allow subtle suggestions to circulate that the insult was a sign of jealousy, that it was a desperate attempt from someone losing influence, then you ensure that the public mind tilts in your favor. In time, the insult will be remembered not as a blow against you, but as the desperate gesture of a lesser figure who could not touch your stature. In the courts of Florence and Rome, the masters of power rarely spoke their own defense. Instead, poets, courtiers, and advisors wove the tale for them. An insult against a prince might soon be retold as a mark of his feared authority, proof that others trembled enough to provoke him in the hope of toppling his rule. The insult itself became a crown, a testament to the fact that no one dared challenge him openly without resorting to petty jabs. By the time the story had passed through a dozen mouths, the prince stood taller than before, and the insulter found himself reduced to a footnote. The key is to understand that truth matters less than belief. In the eyes of the crowd, what they believe happened is what will shape your legacy. If you can mold that belief, you wield a weapon more potent than any blade. An enemy can strike your body once, but if you control the narrative, you can strike their reputation 100 times over. And the most elegant Form of this art is when you are not seen as the hand behind the tale at all, but merely the figure who emerges untarnished and unbothered, while their insult fades into a story told in your favor. There is a great difference between retaliation and revenge. Revenge is born of passion, uncontrolled eruption meant to soothe wounded pride. Retaliation, in the Machiavellian sense, is an instrument sharpened and aimed with the accuracy of a dagger in the dark. When someone disrespects you, the temptation is to answer swiftly, to match insult with insult, blow with blow. But the wise understand that a poorly timed strike can elevate your enemy, while a precisely chosen response can destroy them and elevate you in the same motion. Power is not restored by noise. It is restored by action so calculated that it leaves no doubt in the minds of others as to where the true strength lies. This is why you must never rush to answer disrespect. Instead, you must choose a response that not only addresses the insult, but also rearranges the balance of power entirely in your favor. Let your action be so definitive that it closes the matter permanently, not merely punishing the offender, but warning all others who might consider a similar challenge. Imagine your response as a performance on the grand stage of politics and influence. The audience is not only your enemy, but every observer who will measure you by this moment. The goal is not simply to injure your adversary, but to make your handling of them a spectacle that enhances your reputation. Sometimes this means striking directly, removing them from their position with an action that cannot be ignored. Other times it means delivering a subtle blow whose consequences will unfold over weeks or months, until they are diminished beyond recovery. In the courts of princes, an insult was rarely answered with open rage. A ruler might wait until the offender sought a favor, and then deny it in a manner so public it could not be mistaken for coincidence. Or he might allow the offender to believe he had escaped consequence, only for their most valuable ally to suddenly withdraw support, their fortune to turn, their influence to evaporate without warning. By the time the offender understood, it was too late. The prince's power had not only been restored, it had been magnified, for everyone could see he had the means to reach his enemy at any time without warning. The precision of your response also lies in choosing the method that fits the nature of the disrespect. A public slight demands a public answer, one that asserts dominance in front of the same eyes that witnessed the insult. A private betrayal, however, is best answered in shadows, so that the punishment is felt deeply but the details remain unknown. In both cases, the power of your action is not just in its execution, but in the impression it leaves. Those who witness it must walk away with the unshakable belief that challenging you carries a cost far greater than the reward. It is this belief, once instilled, that makes your authority self-sustaining. For when others know you will respond not wildly, but with deadly accuracy, they will think twice before risking your displeasure. Your precision becomes your shield and your sword, the silent law that governs the respect you are given. Disrespect is not merely an attack on your pride. It is a test of your discipline, your cunning, and your command over the game of power. The weak rush to answer every slight, squandering their energy and revealing their vulnerabilities. The wise, as Machiavelli taught, turn such moments into opportunities to display restraint when others expect rage, to dismantle an enemy without ever declaring war, to seize control of the story that others will tell, and to return power with a strike so precise it leaves no need for a second. Every insult you endure is a stage upon which you can either stumble or ascend. If you remain composed, work in shadows, guide the perception of others, and choose your moment to act with unerring aim, you transform disrespect into the very proof of your strength. Goal is not simply to silence an enemy, it is to ensure that, after you are finished, no one dares to stand in their place. This is the art of the prince, and those who master it will find that even the sharpest insult can be forged into a weapon for their own ascent.